Hey crew, it's Pitt and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we're diving back into the works of Mr. Aleister Crowley. This is Liber 4. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It is not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link from my book where I teach you to do magic responsibly, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration of Liber 4 with Part 2, Chapter 9, the Pentacle. I don't know if we're going to get through more than one chapter today. I'm going to endeavor to do so. As the magic cup is the heavenly food of the Magus, so is the magic pentacle his earthly food. The wand was his divine force, and the sword is his human force. If you were unfamiliar with any of these things, we have covered them already. The cup is hollow to receive the influence from above, and the pentacle is flat like the fertile plains of earth. The name Pentacle implies an image of the all, omne and parvo, but this is by a magical transformation of the pentacle. Just as we made the sword symbolical of everything by the force of our magic, so do we work upon the pentacle. That which is merely a piece of the common bread shall be the body of God. The wand was the will of man, his wisdom, his word. The cup was his understanding, the vehicle of grace. The sword was his reason, and the pentacle shall be his body, the temple of the Holy Ghost. What is the length of this temple? From north to south. What is the breadth of this temple? From east to west. What is the height of this temple? From the abyss to the abyss. There is therefore nothing movable or immovable under the whole firmament of heaven which is not included in this pentacle, though it be but 8 inches in diameter and in thickness half an inch. Fire is not matter at all. Water is a combination of elements. Air is almost entirely a mixture of elements. Earth contains all, both in admixture and in combination. Okay, so this is, right, we have the lens of history, so we have greater understanding, and this is definitely falling into that, right? Water is a combination of elements. Yes. Air is almost entirely a mixture of elements. It is entirely a mixture of elements, whether that is pure elements or whether that is elements in combination. It is indeed a combination of elements. Water is without a doubt, right? It is dihydrogen oxide, H2O. There is a combination of 3 elements that form, right? Air is a little bit different because there is a variety of things in our air. We have oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, like all of the things by themselves, but then we also have carbon monoxide, which is a combination. And so it is entirely a mixture of the elements. And Earth contains all in both admixture and in combination. That is true, right? The Earth does indeed contain all, right? It has all of the elements, and it has compounds. You can find lithium, iron, copper, nickel, all of these elements by themselves or in combination. And so, true. Fire is not matter at all. That is true as well. Fire is plasma. Fire is the literal change of one substance into another. Whenever you strike a fire, you are changing the fuel into the final product. It is making something new from something old. It is alchemy in example. It is plasma being energized, because what you are seeing right here is the exothermic exchange of an internal change. The spark starts the fire by providing the initial change by adding heat to something that absorbs heat rather readily. But what happens is that this gas that is inside of here changes into the gas that is up here, and the process is the fire. It is the plasma we get to witness changing form. We can do the same thing with lightning. Right? When you see a bolt of lightning, that is quite literally energy being transferred. It is from here to there or from there to here, because lightning goes both up and down. But that along that entire thing, there is change happening. Some of those single elements are combining into multiple elements. hydrogen and oxygen combining into water. And in other places, you have water separating into the primal elements and other things as well. We create ozone through lightning strikes. Ozone is O3, right? It is part of what keeps our atmosphere down. It is very vital and necessary to us. And so this is true, even if he did not have the understanding of it quite correct. So must it be with this pentacle, the symbol of earth. And as this pentacle is made of pure wax, do not forget that. Everything that lives is holy. All phenomena are sacraments. Every fact and even every falsehood must enter into the pentacle. It is the great storehouse from which the magician draws. In the brown cakes of corn, we shall taste the food of the world and be strong. Footnote. We have avoided dealing with the pentacle as the paten of the sacrament. Those special instructions about it are given in Liber Legis. It is composed of meal, honey, wine, holy oil, and blood. Okay, so that lets you know right there that it is the wrong thing, right? This last edition right here lets you know straight off the top that you are dealing with the wrong thing. If you eat meat, you consume blood in small quantities, but for the most part you do not. I mean, most of the meat that you eat has been entirely drained. That red stuff that comes out of your steak when you cook it, that's a protein, but it is not blood. I mean, that is not what you are eating. If you are making a deliberate effort to eat blood, you are probably going to get sick. And that is not a judgment that I'm placing upon you. You can do what you want. There are many tribes in Africa that drink raw blood, right? They stab it and they drink from the animal, which is wild. But, they practice magic as well. And so blood magic is a very real thing. It is something that you should be aware of, and you should not be making anything to consume using blood either of your own or an animal's. That doesn't mean that if you accidentally eat blood in food, that it's a bad thing necessarily, right? But you should not be intentionally eating blood. That is a bad thing. When speaking of the cup, it was shown how every fact must be made significant, how every stone must have its proper place in the mosaic. Woe were it were one stone misplaced, but that mosaic cannot be wrought at all, well or ill, unless every stone be there. These stones are the simple impressions or experiences. Not one may be foregone. Do not refuse anything merely because you know that it is the cup of poison offered by your enemy. Drink it with confidence. It is he that will fall dead. Note, metaphor, not for reading by children. Yeah, right? Because somebody's going to read that and be like, oh, I can, like, we have people out there that are like, I can handle snakes because the Bible tells me I should handle snakes. And, well, you might be able to get away with it for a while. You will not get away with it forever. And if you don't believe that, go watch some of these videos of these church handling snakes in Appalachia, right? And you always wind up getting bitten, and it normally ends up pretty bad. Unless they've taken special precautions, right? Some of them pull out the fangs, so there's really no problem. Or they take out the poison glands, the venom glands, so that there's no real problem. That actually happens. They are deceiving their flocks. But you shouldn't be doing things that you know are dangerous just because they are dangerous, right? Handling snakes, stupid, right? Not that you can't handle a king snake with relative safety, but if you are wandering around with copperheads and diamondbacks, it's going to end badly at some point. You might get away with it for a while, right? You shouldn't be doing things that you know are intrinsically dangerous simply for that, right? Now, that's not to tell you can't bungee jump or parachute. Take the appropriate precautions. But that's not doing the same thing as, like, picking up a snake and looking at it and trying to kiss it and some of these other stupid things that we see. Just because, God said that I wouldn't be hurt because I walked down the aisle and said a prayer. That's dumb. Now, that is with the full caveat that you do have a great deal of control over situations, and some of the things that hurt you are only hurting you because you allow them to. And so there is a certain amount of belief that does go into it. I mean, there have been people that have been bitten and suffered no ill effects due to their faith. I don't know that my faith is strong enough for that, but somebody's might be. Okay. How can I give Cambodian art its proper place in art if I have never heard of Cambodia? How can the geologist estimate the age of what lies beneath the chalk unless we have a piece of knowledge totally unconnected with geology, the life history of the animals of whom that chalk is the remains? This, then, is the very great difficulty for the magician. He cannot possibly have all experience, and though he may console himself philosophically with the reflection that the universe is conterminous with such experience as he has, he will find it grow at such a pace during the early years of his life that he may almost be tempted to believe in the possibility of experiences beyond his own. And from a practical standpoint, he will seem to be confronted with so many avenues of knowledge that he will be bewildered which to choose. The ass hesitated between two thistles. How much more that greater ass, that incomparably greater ass, between 2,000? All right, so once again, we're faced with one of the problems that we have when you write, right? People tend to write with current knowledge, right? This is a current knowledge type of thing that has probably been lost to history, right? I have absolutely no frame of reference for an ass that hesitated between two thistles. But in his time, it was probably a fairly common story, and most people probably knew what he was talking about. But when you are writing something by which you are trying to explain something, you should not assume that somebody is going to understand an allegory just because you know it, right? You should endeavor to explain it, and I know allegories are made so that you can pull the knowledge from them yourself, but if they are reliant upon some knowledge such as this, that should be included, right? The inclusion of the story of where this came from, even a reference point to the lore, would be better than this, because this is a completely out of context quote in current times. We see the same thing when people are writing fiction and they are inserting common phrases or things from now, right? If we were to say, well, let's use something that's been around for a while, right? Like cool, right? Cool is making something or removing the heat from something because you can't make something cold, the thermodynamics and all of that, but that's what the original intent of that word was, and then it came to represent something that is good, right? Cool is good. Over time, these things change, and it might change to where it becomes something bad farther in the future. But right now, you write that's cool, and that's the entirety of the sentence. That's cool. There's no context for that, right? Does that mean that it's cold? Or does that mean that it's bad in the future context? Or does that mean it's good now? It's just a simple sentence with no context. There is no context to this story. And this isn't the first time we've seen that. It is something that I haven't remarked upon before, but it finally annoyed me enough that I have to. If you are going to endeavor in whatever you are doing, right? If you are creative and you write or you're doing movies or whatever, try to hold as many of the current references of that nature as you can, or explain them. Because it does no good to have this out. And then we can make an assumption from this about what the allegory was about. But that's making an assumption. And I don't really like to do that. I really like to have it spelled out. I like to have it plain so that we know, right? I can make an assumption that this is about learning, right? About maybe not showing too much patience or making firm decisions and doing what you need to do. But I don't know the context of the allegory. And that's annoying to me. It really is. Fortunately, it does not matter very much. But he should at least choose those branches of knowledge about directly upon universal problem. Directly upon universal problems. He should choose not one but several, and these should be as diverse as possible in nature. It is important that he should strive to excel in some sport, and that sport should be the one best calculated to keep his body in health. He should have a thorough grounding in classics, mathematics, and science, also enough general knowledge of modern languages and of the shifts of life to enable him to travel in any part of the world with ease and security. History and geography he can pick up as he wants them. And what should interest him most in any subject is its links with some other subject, so that his pentacle may not lack what painters call composition. Alright, so this is about the development of the mortal coil, right? This is you becoming the best you that you can possibly be. And this is generally some good advice. I don't know about extending it to absolutes, right? Now, the first one here, the second one. The first one is you should choose not one but several. This can go back to a saying that many people do not know in its entirety, right? A jack of all trades and master of none is better in most cases than a master of one. What that means is that if you have a broad general sense of knowledge about things, you can apply that to a broader spectrum than if you have a very specialized focus. You can see this in medical practitioners. You have general practitioners and you have specialists. Specialists are very good at this one particular thing that they do, setting a leg, doing surgery, for instance. A general practitioner is better with the applied knowledge of the general specificity so that they can refer you to the appropriate specialist. You should try to have as broad a knowledge as you can. There is something that you should specialize in, but even with that, you should have more knowledge. You should be able to tie these things separately together. There are correlations between almost every single thing ever. And so you should be able to find the correlations. That is what this is saying. Choose not one but several. Now, you should have a focus in which you become excellent. Now, if you're like me, that's hard to do, right? I'm a little bit scattershot. I'm here, I'm there, I go, I flow, I get, I go. Right? Some people are very focused in on their one thing. Me, I'm becoming the expert in esoterica, right? That's kind of what we are doing here. I have a knowledge to draw on. I am increasing my knowledge base by not doing just one, but several. And so you should be as diverse as possible in nature at all times. Yes, it is important that you should strive to excel in some sport. Not necessarily, but the understanding of this is that it is to keep your body in health. Now, that sport can be running. That's not really considered a sport unless you were with other people, but it is, right? Golf is considered a sport, and I don't know that that's going to keep you in health at all, right? There is walking involved that is going to help, but it's not all that extraneous, right? It's not pulling a whole lot out of you. There's several other sports that are like that. But if you are vigorously moving your body, you're doing it correctly, even to the point of just walking. My journey began with just walking. I talk about that. It took me 45 minutes to do my first mile because of my injuries. You should be striving to have the best shape that you can. You should only consume the things that are good for you. That doesn't mean you will only ever do that, right? Everybody likes cake. Everybody likes sweets. You shouldn't eat them in excess, but they are perfectly fine in moderation. You should be aiming to be the best you that you can be, and that is what this is about. This whole thing here is telling you, be the best that you can be. Exert yourself so that you are strong. Flex your mind so that you are smart. Be flexible in your understandings so that you can be compassionate. Right? All of these things I tell you in here. I have a chapter devoted to that, making yourself the best that you can be. And this is true. Now, the specifics of that is where it gets a little bit hard, right? He should have a thorough grounding in classics, mathematics, and science. I absolutely agree with that. You should. Now, that doesn't mean you should be a master in any of them, but you should be at least conversant in them. You should have an understanding of them. Enough general knowledge of modern languages and the shifts of life to enable him to travel is a little bit okay. Like, I speak a few words of Spanish, not many. I speak a word of German. I speak one word in like 14 languages. Beer. That was the thing I learned. The thing I wanted when I went everywhere is I was looking for beer. So I learned beer in German. It's beer. I learned beer in Spanish. It's cerveza. So you should be able to be, you should endeavor, like if you were going somewhere, learn the language. If you can. It's not easy for everyone, but it is not a requirement, right? It is a requirement that you know some of these other things. Right? Mathematics, it is a requirement that you should know mathematics if you are going to endeavor in intellectual activities. Everybody should be endeavoring in intellectual activities. You should know science. That doesn't mean you're going to know all of it, but you should know enough of it to spot the bullshit when you see it. Right? Some Billy Carson type of shit, or Neil deGrasse Tyson type of shit. You should know the classics, and you are not going to know all of them. I have several of them in the ancient lore. There are more out there. There's a lot more out there. You will never know all of them. But you should know Plato, right? At least some of his works. You should know Socrates. You should know Paracelsus. You should know something about these things so that you have an understanding of where we came from. That is a truth. This is the one that really gets me right here, though. History and geography he can pick up as he wants them. What? As you want them. Like, I don't need to know anything about history. Who needs to know about despots? Who needs to know about tyranny? Who needs to know about the fight for freedom? Who needs to know any of those things? You can just pick it up if you need it. Like, you shouldn't have a firm grounding in where you came from. You shouldn't have an understanding of the struggles that humanity has gone through to get to where we are. You shouldn't know any of that. It doesn't make any difference whatsoever. And geography, like, if you're going to be traveling to other countries, why do you even need to know where they are? You're going to go there anyway. Just pick it up when you need it. Dang, you don't need to know that France is next to Spain and Germany. Why do you need to know that? Really? Really? He will find that, however good his memory may be, 10,000 impressions enter his mind for every one that he is able to retain, even for a day. That is true as well, right? There are many things that you do not remember your day. There may be certain parts of your day that you remember, but you probably do not remember your drive to work. You probably don't remember your drive home. You may, if there was something exceptional about it, somebody cut you off in traffic and it pissed you off, you might remember that. But you normally don't remember the 15 exits that you pass on your way home. They just go. I mean, there are 10,000 impressions that enter your mind. I would go millions. For everyone that is able to retain, even for a day, is a little bit less of the energy, though. You pick up many of those impressions and they do stick with you. Not all of them by a long shot, but many of them. And the excellence of memory lies in the wisdom of its selection. That is mostly true as well, right? Some people, like I call myself a fount of useless knowledge. I have all kinds of little peccadillos and things that I know about that nobody else on the planet does, right? One of my favorite ones, it is against the law still to this day, right? To spit on the sidewalk in Baton Rouge, but only on Sundays. It's perfectly fine Monday through Saturday. It is only on Sundays that you can be arrested and put in jail for spitting on the sidewalk. That is a law that we have. It hasn't been enforced in like 80 years. But it's there, right? Useless knowledge. There is no point in having that knowledge. Nobody's going to enforce that, right? But I have it. That's not excellence of memory, right? There's no reason for me to retain that information. I have a lot of those. Now, I do have some things that I retain that are quite useful. However, I put some of them in a book. And so, yeah, right? The wisdom of its selection is absolutely true, and you probably won't have a great deal of control over that. The best memories so select and judge that practically nothing is retained which has not some coherence with the general plan of the mind. All pentacles will contain the ultimate conceptions of the circle and the cross, though some will prefer to replace the cross by a point, or by a dowel, or by a triangle. The Vesica Pisces is sometimes used instead of the circle, and the circle may be glyphed as a serpent. Time and space and the idea of causality are sometimes represented. So also are the three stages in the history of philosophy, in which the three objects of study were successively nature, God, and man. The duality of consciousness is also sometimes represented, and the tree of life itself may be figured therein, or the categories. An emblem of the great work should be added. but the pentacle will be imperfect unless each idea is contrasted in a balanced manner with its opposite, and unless there is a necessary connection between each pair of ideas and every other pair. The neophyte will perhaps do well to make the first sketches for his pentacle very large and complex, subsequently simplifying not so much by exclusion as by combination. Just as a zoologist, beginning with the 4 great apes and man, combine all into the single word, primate, because that was a good thing to do. It absolutely made sense. It is not wise to simplify too far, like calling man a primate, since the ultimate hieroglyphic must be an infinite. The ultimate resolution is not having been performed, its symbol must not be portrayed. If any person were to gain access to v.v.v.v.v. Footnote: the motto of the chief of the A Delta, the light of the world himself. Okay, so this right here is the motto of the chief of the A Delta, the light of the world himself, you say. So you, Mr. Aleister Crowley, the light of the world. Yeah, I'm going to pass on that. Hard pass. And ask him to discourse upon any subject. There is little doubt that he could have complied to an unbroken silence, and even that might not be wholly satisfactory, since the Taoic king says that the Tao cannot be declared either by silence or speech. The Tao is the next study that we're going to do before we get into psychology. In this preliminary task of collecting materials, the idea of the ego is not of such a great moment. All impressions are phases of the non-ego, and the ego serves merely as a receptacle. In fact, to the well-regulated mind, there is no question but that the impressions are real, and that the mind, if not a tabula rasa, is only not so because of the tendencies, or innate ideas, which prevents some ideas from being received as readily as others. Footnote: it does not occur to a newly hatched chicken to behave in the same way as a newly born child. These tendencies must be combated. Now, this right here, in combination with this footnote, is telling you that the chicken can learn to be like a newborn child. Distasteful facts should be insisted upon until the ego is perfectly indifferent to the nature of its food. Even as a diamond shall glow red for the rose, and green for the rose leaf, so shalt thou abide apart from the impressions. That sounds like something that came from Crowley's work. This great task of separating the self from the impressions, or vrittis, is one of the many meanings of the aphorism solve, corresponding to the coagula implied in samadhi. And this pentacle therefore represents all that we are, the resultant of all that we had a tendency to be. In the Dhammamapada we read, all that we are from mind results. On mind is founded, built of mind. Who acts or speaks with evil thought, him doth pain follow sure and blind. So the ox plants his foot, and so the car wheel follows hard behind. All that we are from mind results. On mind is founded, built of mind. Who acts or speaks with righteous thought, him happiness doth surely find. So failing not the shadow falls, forever in its place assigned. The pentacle is then, in a sense, identical with karma, or kama of the magician. No, absolutely not. Alright, now, the pentacle is the representation of body. It is quite literally provision, right, in the path of the tarot at least, but it represents the corporeal, right, not the mind. Right? Now, you can make the assumption that the mind creates the body, and probably not far incorrect. Right? The mind is the soul. The soul is the individualized piece of the divine that resides in the temple, and therefore it has some determining effect on the temple. You don't really get to choose that. Well, you kind of do. You get to exercise and take care of it, and that does determine the end in a long way. But the mind and the body are separate, however. They are linked, but they are not the same thing. Like the temple is not you. You are not the temple. You are the thing that resides inside the temple. the individualized slice of divinity making the decisions for the temple. And so, while everything does proceed from the mind, your perceptions create your reality, right? The reality that you see may not be the reality that I see. We have different perceptions. But you do create your viewpoint on things. Positive mindsets, negative mindsets, they do have an effect on reality, but it is not karma, right? Karma is, at least the way that it is explained by the references that we have used. Once again, I have not done the deep dive into Hinduism that would be required for the full understanding of karma, but it is the balance of the good and evil that you have done in your life over time, including past lives for some belief systems. That has nothing to do with this whatsoever, right? You do get to make decisions, that does bear into it, but it is not, the Pentacle is identical with karma. It is not. It is not at all, even in part, right? Your body, like there may be some karmic debt that is still very much up for debate. I don't believe that we necessarily pull the sins across with us, right? It is a decision process to learn, and maybe we didn't learn those particular lessons, and so it can resemble that, but I don't necessarily feel that it is that. I believe that we choose these things. And so that is completely different than this unknown force that is just driving this thing that you have no control over. But there is no way that the corporeal body, like the things that you make decisions about, may have some bearing, right? People are born with birth defects. That is not because they did some evil thing in their past life. It is because they chose that particular challenge for this one. That is my understanding of it. And so this, to me, is going to be completely not correct. The karma of a man is his ledger. The balance has not been struck, and he does not know what it is. He does not even know fully what debts he may have to pay or what is owed him, nor does he know on what dates even those payments which he anticipates may fall due. That is a good gist of it. A business conducted on such lines would be in a terrible mess, and we find, in fact, that man is in just such a mess. While he is working day and night at some unimportant detail of his affairs, some giant force may be advancing pediclodo to overtake him. Many of the entries in this ledger are for the ordinary man necessarily illegible. The method of reading them is given in that important instruction of the A delta called fish harp. Now, consider that this karma is all that a man has or is. His ultimate object is to get rid of it completely when it comes to the point of surrendering. Footnote: to surrender all, one must give up not only the bad but the good, not only weakness but strength. How can the mystic surrender all when he clings to his virtues? True, you are meant to find the balance between the virtues and the vices. I talk about that quite often. We have already hit it several times in this playlist, but there is a balance to be stricken between all of them. You are meant to partake in both the virtues and the vices in moderation. This is true. When it comes to the point of surrendering this self to the beloved, but in the beginning the magician is not that self. He is only a heap of refuse from which that self is to be built up. The magical implements must be made before they are destroyed. The idea of karma has been confused by many who ought to have known better, including the Buddha, with the ideas of poetic justice and of retribution. We have the story of one of the Buddha's arahats who, being blind, in walking up and down, unwittingly killed a number of insects. The Buddhists regard the destruction of life as the most shocking crime. His brother arahats inquired as to how this was, and Buddha spun them a long yarn as to how, in a previous incarnation, he had maliciously deprived a woman of her sight. This is only a fairy tale, a boogie to frighten the children, and probably the worst way of influencing the young yet devised by human stupidity. Karma does not work in this way at all. In any case, moral fables have to be very carefully constructed, or they may prove dangerous to those who would use them. You will remember Bunyan's passion and patience. Naughty Passion played with all of his toys and broke them. Good little Patience put them carefully aside. Bunyan forgets to mention that by the time Passion had broken all of his toys, he had outgrown them. Bruh. Now, first off, at least he gave us the reference for this, right? Anywhere else, he would have just left off this first part. Right? And so at least he gave us the reference to Bunyan's passion and patience. Now, I am not familiar at all with that, but this is an interesting thing, right? Passion played with all of his toys and broke them, and Patience put them carefully aside, which means that he did not get to play with his toys at all. That is definitely an overconsumption of the vice or the virtue of patience. Now, that is not intrinsically one of the virtues. It is part of the virtues, right? Sloth and diligence. The reflection, I see you, Jason. The reflection of sloth and diligence, the part that you should reflect is patience, right? The appropriate use of sloth and diligence. And so, Patience carefully put his toys aside so he never got to play with them, and Passion played with his and broke them. Where is it implied that he forgets to mention? Right? How do you know that he forgot to mention? It was his story that he was telling you. Are you inserting yourself into his story? It sure appears to be what you were doing. Karma does not act in this tit-for-tat way. An eye for an eye is a sort of a savage justice, and the idea of justice in our human sense is quite foreign to the constitution of the universe. Karma is the law of cause and effect. There is no proportion in its operations. Once an accident occurs, it is impossible to say what may happen, and the universe is a stupendous accident. We go out to tea 1,000 times without mishap, and the 1,001st time we meet with someone who changes radically the course of our lives forever. There is a sort of sense in which every impression that is made upon our minds is the resultant of all the forces of the past. No incident is so trifling that it has not in some way shaped one's disposition. But there is none of this crude retribution about it. One may kill 100,000 lice if in one brief hour at the foot of the Baltoro Glacier, as Father Pete once did. How do you get infested with 100,000 lice? You got to be pretty nasty to do that. Right now, I understand that lice happen. That is a thing. But to get 100,000 lice is impressive. Not in a good way. It would be stupid to suppose, as the Theosophist inclines to suppose, that this action involves one in the doom of being killed by a louse 100,000 times. That would be stupid, yes. This ledger of karma is kept separate from the petty cash account, and in respect of this bulk, this petty cash account is very much bigger than the ledger. If we eat too much salmon, we get indigestion and perhaps nightmare. It is silly to suppose that a time will come when a salmon will eat us and find us disagree. On the other hand, we are always being terribly punished for actions that are not faults at all. Even our virtues rouse insulted nature on revenge, only if you are overtaking in them. Karma only grows by what it feeds on, and if karma is to be properly brought up, it requires a very careful diet. With the majority of people, their actions cancel each other out. No sooner is effort made than it is counterbalanced by idleness. Eros gives place to Anteros. Not one man in 1,000 makes even an apparent escape from the commonplace of animal life. Birth is sorrow, life is sorrow, sorrowful are old age, disease, and death. But resurrection is the greatest misery of all. That is the prison planet mentality, that victim mentality shit that I just hate so very much. Birth is not sorrow, birth is joyful. Life is not sorrow, even though it does contain sorrowful moments. It also contains joyful moments. It contains wonderful things if you just have the inclination to look for them. Sorrowful are old age. Why? Because you have had the experience of all of these experiences. You get to watch your children grow. You get to see your grandchildren be born. That's sorrowful. Why is it sorrowful? Because you're going to leave? So, that's part of the cycle. Disease and death, yeah, those are there. They're not necessarily sorrowful. But resurrection is the greatest misery of all. Well, you're choosing that, at least in my understanding. And so it's not misery. It is misery if you choose it. If you have decided that it's going to be a shitty day, there is nothing I can do to dissuade you. But if you have decided it's going to be a wonderful day, that does not matter how much shit gets thrown at you. None of it will stick. You can choose to have this life be sorrowful. Many people do every single day. I would even venture most. But it doesn't have to be the case. You get to choose your direction. And if you are choosing sorrow, you are free to change that at any point in time. Oh, what misery, birth incessantly, as Buddha said. And that's one of the problems that I have with Buddhism, right? It is a victim mentality mindset from the get-go. It is the problem. The same with Christianity, the same with Judaism, right? They are both looking to blame someone else for the things that you are doing. One goes on from day to day with a little of this and a little of that, a few kind thoughts and a few unkind thoughts. Nothing really gets done. Body and mind are changed beyond recall by nightfall, but what meaning has any of this change? How few there are who can look back through the years and say that they have made advance in any definite direction. And in how few is that change, such as it is, a variable with intelligence and conscious volition? Hey look, it's me, y'all. A dead weight of the original conditions under which we were born has counted for far more than all of our striving. That's you, buddy. The unconscious forces are incomparably greater than those of which we have had any knowledge. This is the solidity of our pentacle, the karma of our earth that whirls us will-he-nilly. That's the first time I've seen that spelled that way, right? Normally it is Willynilly, around her axis at the rate of 1,000 miles an hour. It's more than that, big guy. I think it's like 53,000 miles an hour, something like that. And 1,000 is Aleph, a capital Aleph, the microcosm of all wandering air, the fool of the tarot, the aimless and fatality of things. If you are unaware, we have been doing a study of the Hebrew language here on the channel on Podcast. The link will be provided above. It's towards the end of the playlist. But we've had Jason from Green Country Agroforestry come on, and he has knowledge of the Hebrew alphabet and the symbology behind them. And one of the things that we studied on there was Aleph, right? Aleph is the dividing between this and that, the understanding between what is good and what is not. It is the first letter of the alphabet, and it is the deciding between. It is literally where consciousness starts, between this and that, right? In the garden, choosing between good and evil. And Aleph. 1,000 is Aleph, a capital Aleph, the microcosm of all wandering air, the fool of the tarot. Now that one actually kind of fits because the fool of the tarot is quite literally the key to the entire tarot. He walks all of the paths, and so the fool of the tarot would be the one that decides between the this and the that, so that one actually fits. The aimlessness and fatality of all things is, again, that victim mentality mindset. It is very difficult then, in any way, to fashion this heavy pentacle. We can engrave characters upon it with a dagger, but they will scarcely come to more than did the statue of Ozymandias, King of Kings, in the midst of the unending desert. We cut a figure on the ice. It is effaced in a morning by the tracks of the other skaters, nor did that figure do more than scratch the surface of the ice, and the ice itself must melt before the sun. Indeed, the magician may despair when he comes to make the pentacle. Everyone has the material. One man's pretty well as good as his brother's. But for that pentacle to be in any way fashioned to a willed end, and even to an intelligible end, or even to a known end, hoc opus hic labor est. It is indeed the toil of ascending from a furnace and escaping to the upper air. This is another one of those things that really bother me, right? Latin is a dead language. It was a dead language at his point in time. Nobody really spoke it. It was still written. It is less so now. Much like with the reference that it wasn't there for the story, this is the problem because it is a dead language. Not everybody speaks it, and not everybody's going to take the time to go and look it up. I'm not. And so, if you are going to endeavor something like this and you are trying to sound fancy by inserting these type of words, which is absolutely what he is doing, right? He is trying to sound fancy by inserting these things, then explain them, right? Write it in English afterwards. He has done that several times, and it is just now that it has annoyed me enough that I'm going to speak about it. But if you are endeavoring to do something like this and you give the Latin, give the English, he is writing in English, there is no expectation that someone who buys a book in English is going to be able to translate Latin, German, French, Italian, any of them, right? There is no expectation that someone who buys a book in English should have to go and Google something that you put into that book. Back then, Google wasn't even a thing. You would have had to go find a reference for Latin in a library somewhere to try to interpret what this means. Right now, Opus's work, Liber is obvious, and Est is, and so I'm going to assume that this is his work, his labor is, right? But I don't know that. That is an assumption I am making based upon a very brief knowledge of what these words mean. And so, if you are going to try to enlighten people, then enlighten them. It is indeed the toil of ascending from Avernus and escaping into the upper air. In order to do it, it is most necessary to understand our tendencies and to will the development of one, the destruction of another. And though all elements in the Pentacle must ultimately be destroyed, yet some will help us directly to reach a position from which this task of destruction becomes possible. And there is no element therein which may not be occasionally helpful. And so, beware. Select, select, select. This pentacle is an infinite storehouse. Things will always be there when we want them. We may see to it, occasionally, that they are dusted and the moth kept out, but we shall, usually, be too busy to do much more. Remember that in traveling from the earth to the stars, one dare not be encumbered with too much heavy luggage. Nothing that is not necessary part of the machine should enter into its composition. Well, that presents a severe problem for all of these recent chapters because not a single part of this is physically necessary, right? You do not need a physical representation of the pentacle. You do not need a physical representation of the wand, the dagger, the cup. Now, the chain and the scourge we talked about are not necessary at all, but there is no need for the physical parts of these things. There is no need for the ceremony. There is no need for the invocations. There is no need. It is not necessary. And I say no need, but there is a difference between needed and necessary, right? And let's go into the explanation of that right before we get to the wrap up here. Needed is what you absolutely have to, or necessary is what you absolutely have to have in order to get the task done. Needed is something that wouldn't be beneficial to have in order to get the task done. And you can tell the difference between them by this. Suppose you have a tree and you want to take that tree from the upright position to the horizontal position. In order to do so, the necessity, the thing that you absolutely have to have, is a sharp edge. Now, what can be needed is an axe, or a machete, or a hatchet, or a knife. Any of those have a sharp edge. Any one of those can get the job done, but they have different degrees of effectiveness. The needed part of that is different from the necessary part. You need a tool. You get to choose which tool, but the necessary part is that it has the sharp edge. You can pick any one of these tools and you can invest your energy into those tools, but it is not necessary. You can do all of this without any of that, and I say that because I have. This book right here contains instructions on how to do all of this without any of that. I have done everything that he attempted to do, right? At least caveats, right? I didn't do blood magic, right? He did blood magic. I am not on the same level there. He did sex magic. I don't do sex magic. We are not on the same level there. But he was attempting to manifest into his life real results, right? That I have done. I have affected change in my own life through the electromagnetic manipulation of the forces of creation, which is the Holy Spirit. I asked for healing. I received instructions on how to do it for myself. And I have the results. That is why I stand so firm in the statements that I make. It's because I'm not just reading someone else's work. I am discussing in the understanding that I have and I have already given. And that is an important thing to remember. The necessary part is the internal workings. All of the extra stuff, it can be needed. If you need a pentacle to remind you of these particular things in the ceremony, then use it, right? But that is not necessary for everyone. That means that it's needed, not necessary. And that is an important thing. And when he says that nothing that is not a necessary part, I agree. Now, though this pentacle is composed only of shams, some shams somehow seem to be more false than others. A sham is an illusion. The whole universe is an illusion, but it is an illusion difficult to get rid of, and I disagree. I believe that we are here corporeally. I do not believe that we are here as an illusion. We are here temporarily. That is true, and that is the part that makes people say it's an illusion, because we go somewhere when we leave. That is an assumption. I believe it, I assume it, but it is still an assumption. I have had a direct revelatory experience by which caused me to believe it, and it is still an assumption. So, right, there is no part of this existence that leads to this is only an illusion. Even if you are able to do some pretty remarkable things, it does not make it an illusion. It does not make it entirely in your mind either. It is true compared with most things, but 99 out of every 100 impressions are false, even in relation to the things on their own plane. Such distinctions must be graven deeply upon the surface of the pentacle by the holy dagger. There is only one other of the elemental instruments to be considered, namely the lamp. And he says that, but there are several other chapters that are going to relate to that, so we're not going to try and burn through them today. That's going to bring us to the end of, what was this? The pentacle. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. I feel like I have explained fairly clearly why I have the objections that I do. I try to do so whenever I have the objections. I try not to just, this is an objection that I have and just let it roll. I try to explain why, because it is important to understand, right? There are works that you can do. I fully and firmly believe that, but it is still a belief. It is fully in the realm of speculation until it has been repeated. But I do have at least one other person who is confirming that the things that I wrote about in here, they've been able to do too. Now, they already had an understanding. It is not the same understanding, but the understanding as explained in here correlated perfectly with the understanding that they already had. And perfectly is a big word. Okay. We are trying to discern between the things that are useful and the things that are not, what is necessary and what is needed, and most of this book is not needed. Many parts can be, or are not necessary. Many parts can be needed, right? If you need the reminder that you need to do this in this particular way with your focus in this particular, then use those tools by all means. But I don't at all, in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. Like, I use the sword of discernment. I didn't call it that 6 months ago, right? I use the cup of understanding. I didn't call it that. These things are terminology to help us better understand, but they are not intrinsic to the process. When I did this, none of this was part of it, right? Nothing that he talked about. I did not, like, I've got tools back here on the shelf. I got 2 bowls, one on the top shelf, one on the bottom, full of semi-precious stones. I've got a wand back there. I've got sage. I've got incense. I don't use any of that, right? I have, right, but it is not intrinsic to, right? You don't have to have. And when I did this, There was none of that. None at all. It was all internal. 100%. No external at all. No wands, no stones, no nothing. Pure prayer, fasting, and meditation was the entirety of it. And that is why I stress that is the necessary part. All of the other stuff can be added on. It might be needed by some people, but it is not intrinsic to the process itself. And that's where we're going to leave this. If you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow. Throw me a comment whether you agree or disagree with anything that was said. Put it in the box down below. And if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If you really like what I'm doing over here, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of the book where I teach you to do magic responsibly. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Pit's Take. Peace.